Good morning and welcome to our talk. I would like to introduce Thomas from Castle Ridge, and I'm Jonas from Eclipse Source. We are both working for companies who build tools and IDEs for our customers. However, today we are speaking in our role as two of the Theia project leads, and we would like to give you an update around the Theia ecosystem. We will cover one very active year of development at Theia. So we start with news since the last EclipseCon, where we gave a similar talk. We have a lot of things to show. What we will do in this talk, we will just one by one talk about exciting news. And the good news for you, we will mainly do demonstrations. Thomas will take them over. I will give a short introduction, and then we will dive into the demo section. And then I will take it over again for a short conclusion. So enjoy the show. Before we dive into the news, I would like to give a very short introduction on what is Eclipse Theia. For those of you who might don't know the project, I will keep this short. So Theia is an open source project, and it produces a lot of things, but the two most important things are the Theia platform. That's a platform or a framework to build tools and IDEs. So if you want to build a custom tool, a custom IDE to do or to fill for whatever purpose you want, Theia is a very compelling choice because the framework comes with a lot of reusable features, a standard workbench, and a way to integrate different features that might be from the community and your own proprietary feature, and then create a tool offering that people can download or use in the browser, which is one of the unique selling points. Then there's a second thing that will play a role in the demonstrations today. The Theia project has a default product because many of the projects that use the Theia platform are actually not publicly available. Some are, but they are from different vendors. Now, the Theia project itself also has a product based on the Theia platform, which is called the Theia IDE. That's a standard software development tool. It's kind of an open version of VS Code, looks very similar, and this is a thing that you can really just download and use. It's built on the Theia platform, and it serves two purposes for us. First, we want to provide such a tool for people to use, and second, it's a very good showcase and demonstrator of the capabilities of the platform. So, and in the demonstrations today, when we demonstrate things that the platform can do, Thomas will mainly use the Theia IDE because that tool is openly available. You can try anything that he shows you today yourself because the tool is available. All right, let's dive into the news. The first news is again about the Theia IDE. So this has existed for quite a while. Originally, the name of this tool was Theia Blueprint. You might have heard of that, but over 1 year ago, we decided to change the name. The original purpose of Theia Blueprint was really to be a blueprint, like a showcase how to do things with Theia. But we experienced, hey, this is actually working really well as a tool, and people started to use that as a development tool, including a lot of the Theia committers. So we thought, okay, let's rebrand that. Let's make this really a product that we provide to our users. So we changed the name to Theia IDE. We published a beta version last year and continued to improve it based on user feedback we are really thankful for. And in July this year, it has left the beta phase, so it's now an official release. So if you have not seen it, definitely check it out. You can download it as a desktop application. You can try it online. You can host it yourself online. There's a Docker container you can use to start it. And quite recently, we're also in the Snap Store. So it's really easy to consume, and it's a really, really cool tool. If you're familiar with VS Code, you will not need to learn anything new. It looks very similar, but it's completely open. So definitely check it out. And the last thing I would like to show before we dive into the demo is another new, very recently added part of Theia called Theia AI. Again, it consists of two pieces. Theia AI is a framework for tool builders if you want to integrate AI into your custom tools and IDEs. Again, it contains basic reusable building blocks that you can use to easily implement features like communicating with an LLM, managing your prompts, providing additional context in the prompts, And many of these features, if you're experienced in the field, are very common and recurring. And we want to take the burden away from tool builders to implement all these ground features from scratch. So if you want to create AI assistants for your tools, you can get started very fast and really focus on your domain-specific problems, developing your prompts, and you don't have to worry with, I don't know, how to implement a streaming API to communicate with an LLM. That's already there. And on top of Theia AI, we have developed a set of agents that are integrated in the Theia IDE, again, the tool that you can download. I've demonstrated that a lot on Monday, so we will not focus too much again about this. But if you're interested in that, if you start the recent version of Theia IDE, you can turn the AI features on, and there are features like code completion, terminal assistant, a chat, and Thomas will demonstrate, I think, 2 of them. If you're interested more in that, there was a talk on Monday, and you can also watch the recording. If you're interested in Theia AI, there will be a talk this afternoon. And without further ado, with that, I hand it over to Thomas for the demo session, and he will present quite a lot more features that have been developed in the last year.
So thank you, Jonas. Just first off, I'm going to use in all the demos here our latest release of Theia IDE 154.0. So anything you see in the demo is actually in the product. You can use it today. As Jonas said, the first thing I want to show you is a bit about Theia AI. And I have a bit of code here. It's a VS Code extension. It has some API imports, and it has a temperature sensor and the humidity sensor, which it registers with the system. And if I go here, and maybe I want to add a pressure sensor, right? And with a bit of luck, the AI is going to let me add a pressure sensor, and that's actually correct code. I can just use that, right? There is also the chat view, because I actually am Spanish, right? No, I'm not, but I might want to translate this into Spanish, so I can just go into the chat view and say, translate the, sorry, wrong, selected. No, it's not giving me that now. Select the text into Spanish. And it does what an AI does. It thinks about it, and it tells me what I should do. But there's also a button here that actually lets me just insert the thing, an actionable thing. I can click here, and it's going to replace the whole thing here with stuff in Spanish. I did a mistake here, so I didn't select this, so it didn't translate it. But the interesting thing about Theia AI, which is different from others, is that you can control pretty much anything in the frameworks. So if we go to the AI configuration view, and down here to the code completion section, I can just click Edit here, and it's going to show me and let me edit the prompt that is sent to the LLM when I do that kind of code completion. You can see there are a couple of variables that you can use in those prompts that will be filled in at runtime. Also, I can select which language model I want to use. Here I'm using OpenAI GPT-4o, but there are like many ones, Llama, whatever. So you can choose that as well. And you can see that the configuration view is very big, so pretty much anything can be configured. So much for that. So the next thing we want to look at is improvements in the notebook editors. Let me go to a different window. I think it's, yeah. It's here, yeah. So one thing that we improved a lot between last year is, for example, that we can run many more notebook types. This is a notebook that is based on the GitHub issues kernel that is from Microsoft. They use that for their own inbox. And you can see there's a notebook cell here that goes to my repo where this example code lives, and it will just fetch the open issues, which I can click on, and it's going to open that thing. I already demoed this notebook last year, and those who were in the demo remember that it didn't work all that well. But a lot of work has gone into making the notebook support more reliable, that everything works. And like, for example, I can do stuff like move the cells around. We have drag and drop now. Lots of stuff that did not work last year. Performance is much better than last year. I have a variables view. I can open up down here, and if I run a cell that actually defines a variable, I can follow the values and how they evolve down here. But it's probably best if you're into that kind of use case that you try it out yourself, because there's lots of fixed bugs, lots of improvements. Right. So the next one I'm actually pretty happy about, and because I worked on it myself, and that's detachable text editors. Already last year there were some, for example, we could detach the terminal and into a separate window, and you could just type stuff there on the other monitor. And that also works now for regular text editors. Of course, if I click this button, it's going to open a separate window, which I can move around, of course. It's a regular window, not just inside the browser. And everything is just supposed to work. I can do code assist in here. You can see the mini-map that's working. I can navigate to a different file. What else? I can do breakpoints in here. So everything is just working as it would inside the main Theia window. And of course, if I do something like do an edit here, and I try to close this thing, you actually get the dialog on the right window, and it does the right thing. Let's not save that for a moment. All right, the next one is also for Theia, interesting for Theia itself. We don't have it yet, but it would be cool, and that's dev containers. If you're not familiar with dev containers, they're a format for specifying a container and some metadata that you can use to develop in that container. And you can read up on it on containers.dev if you're interested about the specification. And the idea is that you write a file inside your repo that describes a container that you can use with the remote development support in Theia to develop inside that container. So if we look at this file here, let's look at the demo app that I have here. And it's a very simple Node.js Express app. And there's like an endpoint here. If I go to the OS endpoint, it's going to tell me what platform I'm running on. So let's just run this. Yep, this is the right one. So npm run. It's going to tell me, yes, the server is running. So if I go to localhost 3030, it's going to tell me, yes, welcome. And if I go to the OS endpoint, it's going to tell me I'm running on Windows 32. So far, so good. But here is where it gets interesting. If you go back to that container, you can see that it defines a couple of things: an image, a container image. I'm just using the stock Node 22 image because that's all I need, but also some customizations which are specific to tools. And here I'm telling it that I'd like to have these two extensions for TypeScript inside the container, installed inside the container. So what can I do with that? If I go down here, there is an action reopening container. And sometimes it does something and sometimes it doesn't. Let's give this another try. Let's do the same thing. Reopening, yes, and creating container, etc. And now Theia actually reconnects to a remote backend inside the container. And you can see I have the same source code I had before here, right? I have the language support TypeScript, which is working inside the container. But if you look at the terminal here, that's not a Windows command line. So I'm actually running inside the container, and the workspace I have in my Windows machine is mounted into that container. So did I stop the other? Yeah, this is still running. So this might not work now. But if I do the npm run again, tells me the server is running. So pray for me. No, actually, because I still had the thing running, I could not forward the port to the outside, but basically it would, there you go. It would tell me I'm running on Linux. So what can you do with it? There are two main applications of this. The first one you've seen. I'm doing cross-platform development on my Windows machine, and I just use my normal Theia, but I can develop on Windows. And the second one is if you check in one of those dev container files into your repo, you can give people a way to just click a button and they'll have a container with all the tools installed that they need, Node.js, compilers, whatever, and all the extensions that they need to edit your project. That's pretty cool. I'm actually looking forward to doing this for Theia if I can. Right. What's next? If you are familiar with Theia, you know that Theia accesses the resources on the back end through services which are injected through dependency injection. But if you do that, you can actually replace those services with some which do not need a back end. You end up with a version of Theia which does not need a backend. It's just a static website, right? So let's do that. There is actually here we have it. In the regular Theia repo, there's an example that is called browser only. And this is a Theia example, so you can build it with yarn Theia browser only build, I think. And if you do that, it's going to generate some stuff into the lib folder here. There's a front-end window folder. And if I go down here, where it is, there's an index.html. And if I look at that, that's just an HTML file that loads some bundle.js, right? But if I open this in the browser, I end up with an instance of Theia. And I did not start a web server or anything, right? So ooh, doesn't have a folder open. Yeah. You know what the problem is? Well, normally I would have a pre-populated. Ah, there we go. You think that's right now? Just didn't have the right folder open. So I have actually a file system which is based on the browser local storage, which we bound into that Theia instance. So I have it's pre-populated because this is a demo with a couple of files, and I can edit this file. It does autosave. If I close it and reopen it, actually the same thing comes back. And not everything is rebound correctly in this demo instance, but it's a real Theia instance which you can just open by opening an index.html file, right? One thing that's a bit pity is that we cannot run VS Code web extensions right now. The mechanisms are there, but we don't have the ways to actually serve or package the extensions so that they can be found by this instance. The state of this feature is a working proof of concept, and we think this concept has pretty big potential. I mean, since it's just a static website, you need almost no resources to serve this, right? So if you want to have a service that uses this, it's just static files. It's trivially cacheable, right? So you're not going to need a big server on the back end. The second thing is, imagine like you have a robot, big industrial robot, and inside the robot is a file which you can click, and you have an IDE that you can use to debug stuff on there, or that you can use to diagnose problem, or which offers a configuration UI. So that. Hi, Mark. So let's go to you'll understand why in a second. Let's go back to that, to my, oh, I'm still in the dev container. Let's close that connection. So let's say let's say I have a problem with my app, even though it's very simple, but I might not have much experience. And I need help with this. And I know that Mark back there, he's an expert on Express websites. So I want to get him to help. So down here, there's a collaborate button. And I click this and I say create new collaboration session. That's creating a session. And now it has created a session. I get a code which I can copy to the clipboard. And now I'm talking to Mark and say, this is broken. Can you help? And then I paste him the code for the session I created. And eventually he's gonna join my session, but I know this does not work. Yep. Und since we're in Mainz, I'm asking, soll man reinlassen? Lasse man rein. Anyway, so he's here now. Where's Mark? Oh, there's Mark. So you can see he can select stuff, he can edit. Does he have any, do you have any suggestions what I should do here? Yeah, helpful as ever. But you get the idea. The thing is, what you see here is very similar to what VS Code does with, what's it called?
Live share?
Live share, exactly. The difference is that this is not just a product, because it's just co-editing, right? They do this too. But this is a framework, an open framework. It's completely open source. You can download and run your own server. And you can, if you have your own version of Theia, which is a specialized product, you can add collaboration to your own UI. Let's say a graphical editor, and you can add a collaboration protocol to that using that infrastructure, right? So it's not just what you can do, but it's also what you can build. All right, thanks, Mark. Let's.
Applause for Mark.
Yes, thank you. The next one is, I think, a minor feature, but an important one. Where are we? Yeah, we could just kill this further. So it's the metrics endpoint for the Electron version of Theia, which is very useful if, for example, if you want to run your UI tests and you can have statistics about, for example, from how much memory usage you have, et cetera, and you can track that over time. So if we just start the Electron version and we give it a port. Yeah, why not? Yeah, wrong syntax, sorry. This is the wrong window. Yeah, of course, sorry. Yes. It's going to start up with Theia, and the front end will be started, because usually it picks a random port, but here it's going to use the port 3030. So I can go back to my browser. I'm already at port 3030, but I'm going to go to the endpoint metrics. You see, Theia is starting. This is the splash screen. Perhaps it's here already, perhaps not. Forbidden.
Yeah, OS is still
there.
there.
Oh, sorry, yeah. You can see it spews out a whole lot. Let's look at the page source here, because that's more clear. Tells me a whole lot of metrics, which I can use in my statistics to keep track of what the metrics are here, right? Or in production or whatever. All right, what's next? If you know Theia, you probably know that Theia can be extended with Theia plugins or VS Code extensions. And you just install a VSX file, and you have new capabilities in the IDE, right? And Theia has for a long time had the ability that you can actually define new workspaces for a plugin API. So like you would import VS Code and then say VS Code.window.show dialog, you can have your own API and say import my API and then say my API whatever foo.bar, right? And you could use that in a VS Code extension, for example. And I made a bit of a there we go. And I made a bit of an example here. You've already seen this this code before. Need to start it different. Yeah, here we are. I made a little view as a Theia extension, which you'll see in a second. and it does a very simple thing. It just showed me some measurements, like weather measurements, right? And you can see we have no measurements. I can have an action to measure some values, but we still have no measurements, right? Because I have no sensors. So wouldn't it be cool if I could make an API that plugins could use to add sensors? So I did a little defined an API, which you've seen before, just as one call, register sensor. You have a sensor with a label, a unit, and you can use it to measure things. And I already wrote a little VS Code extension that imports my sensing API from this module and defines the temperature and the humidity sensor. And I've already built this extension, and I have it here. So let's just install this VSX. And with a little luck, if I measure some values again, now it has values. That's cool and all, but we've been able to do this for a long time. The trouble is, if you do VS Code extensions or plugins, they're always bound to one window. So if you open a second window, it's going to open a second copy of that plugin, right? But what happens if I open a new window? You're going to notice that it has already some measurements, but it also has the exact same measurements as the one over here. And if I do some more measurements, it's going to change to the exact same values. So what we're doing here, we're not extending the Theia window, we're extending the backend of Theia. And Theia, you could always add stuff and change stuff, but you had to do it at compile time. And now we have the same capability to just plug in, throw in the file at runtime, and you have new capabilities in the Theia backend. This is, of course, a contrived example, but you can think, for example, let's say you have an app that has different permissions for to access resources for different people in the organization, and there might be 20 systems where you want to access. You could of course build it into your Theia application, but you could also offer an API that people can write the glue code themselves, put it in a VS Code extension basically, and just plug it in at their site for ISVs or whatever, right? This is actually not this. There's a use case from an adopter we have, which I think we can't talk about, but anyway, those kinds of things you could do. Right, and that brings me pretty much to the end of the demos. And the last thing I want to talk, whoops, nope, that was not the idea. Sorry. Yes, slideshow. Last thing, stability and performance improvements. And that's another one you'll either have to believe me or try yourself. But for example, we fixed since last year, since the close of EclipseCon, we fixed 523 issues. That's like way more than one a day. And you can feel it when you use the IDE. And we addressed many of the issues that affect the Theia IDE use case that you've seen here. But also our adopters have told us that they feel it too. There is lots less problems because we're using it every day, and so many of the mainline code paths are just exercised more, and you can feel it. And with that, back to you, Jonas.
Thank you for the demo session. Cool. One last feature before we dive into the conclusion. That's Theia Cloud. So as you might know, any Theia-based application you can bundle as a desktop application via Electron and then make it installable, but you can also run the same application in the browser and, for example, host it in the cloud so that users of the tool can just open a URL to get your tool. If you do that for one person, it's very simple because you can just start a Docker container, we provide one, and then it's running in the cloud. If you want to provide this online to many people, you need a solution to orchestrate this, which basically means if a new user arrives, they need to log in, they need to authenticate, and then you need to start their backend somewhere, stop it then if they don't need it anymore. So basically managing the backend containers. And there is a very neat solution for that that has existed for quite a while called Theia Cloud. And very recently, this framework was actually contributed to the Theia core project, so it's now part of the Theia project. It's a very minimalistic framework. It really focuses on doing or fulfilling this use case to make your life easier to host Theia applications online. It's based on Kubernetes, so it doesn't reinvent anything, but it really adds a thin layer on top of Kubernetes. Very extensible, so you can integrate it in your own website, company portal, product, whatever. And it has a very minimal runtime overhead. We will not demonstrate that because the demo is very boring. You just go to a website, click, and then Theia starts up. You can actually try it yourself. There's a link which hosts several demo products where you can just use them then online. So for example, the Theia IDE is available online. You can just try it. You only need to be logged in GitHub, and that's it. All right, now let's dive into the conclusion, a quick community update. So one interesting change we have in the release process that you might have seen or that you might feel, since we have the Theia IDE, what we actually do is what we didn't do before. We do a preview build of a new release, and we publish that preview build of the Theia IDE, and then we start to use that, or a group of people start to use this Theia IDE, which is a super good test, because we have actually an example project which tests a new release if there are any blockers or any new regressions. And this is really super efficient. I would say every second release we find something that would have been in the final release, and we can actually fix it before we really publish the final release then. So this improves stability. Besides that, from the community, I would say the biggest word here is continuity. For the last year, everything has been very stable. We have regular community releases. So if you don't know, Theia publishes a release every month. So if you're waiting for a new feature, that's very fast release cycle. However, every 3 months we do what we call a community release, which is more focused on stabilization and especially interesting for other technologies that integrate with Theia, because if they want to stay compatible, they typically choose the community release and test against that. So if you're an adopter and you're adopting Theia for your product, probably the community release is a good way to consume Theia. If you're waiting for a feature, of course, you can always switch to the monthly releases. We have full VS Code extension compatibility since over a year now, so that is just ongoing. So whenever there's a new API in VS Code, we implement that, and we're having a very stable process around this. And in general, the community is very stable and diverse. So we have contributions from many different companies, from very big ones to small one, very diverse set of contributors, and we are, like, if you look at the statistics, very constant contributions, which is actually even unusual for such a project. Typically, contributions go down over time if not super many features are arriving, but currently they actually go up and there. I'm super happy about the collaboration in the ecosystem. People collaborate on creating features from different companies. And the last point I think is really important. We are really starting to create open alternatives to features that are only available proprietary in other ecosystems. So for example, LiveShare is an example. The AI support, the remote container support. So all of this is open source, and it's not available open source and transparently in other ecosystems. Okay, now I have to fast forward a bit because we're coming to an end. And this is our list of current contributors and adopters. The only thing that I would like to mention here, if you adopt Theia yourself and you're not on this list, please add yourself. There is a link under this on the website where you can click, and you just need to update a logo. And we're really, really happy to see more companies here, because this list is not complete. We know, because sometimes we find products and we can actually see that they're based on Theia. So yeah, just add yourself here. It helps us, and it's a great way to show off your tool. Quick announcement, there will be an event dedicated to Theia in around 3 weeks. It's online. It's completely free of charge, November 13th and 14th. It's in the afternoon for Europeans and in the morning for Americans, so you can join from all around the globe. Just get registered. It will be only around Theia and ecosystem, and it's for free, and you can watch it from your desk. So just Google for TheiaCon 2024 to find the website. All right, let's look at last week. We actually gave a similar talk last year, and we tried to predict what will we present next year, and we said LiveShare, backendless Theia, and Theia IDE. Yes, we did it. Everything was there, which is pretty cool. So what do we expect for, sorry, that was wrong. What would we expect for next year? I would say more AI. That is just starting, and it's very efficient to add new features to Theia now with the base framework that we have. And we're currently, we're starting to work on improving the backend-less support to really have this production ready to be able to deploy a tool without a backend, which is really saving resources and infrastructure. So we think that's pretty cool. All right, and we're happy to take any question. I would like to highlight again Philip's talk this afternoon if you want to learn more about how to use Theia AI to build your tools. And with that, we're happy to take any question. And thank you, Thomas, for preparing the great demo. So he took over a lot of work for that. Thank you. Sorry, John, you will be next.
First of all, excuse me if the question has been already done or if you already explained the topic, because I joined some minutes later. I was really impressed about the dev containers, which is a feature I already use, more or less, coding with VS Code and using WSL as a backend, let's say, because I have some development environments on different VSL virtual machines, and I can switch between them and etc. We are forced to use Windows, so we cannot switch on Linux. So the Docker for us is a bit of no-go because it requires licenses. We are a big company, so we have to pay for it. My question is if the dev containers features is only limited to Docker right now, or there are also possibilities to extend to other container technologies like Gitbot, or maybe also using WSL, and if there are plans for the future to make it broader. This is the question.
I think we should just let Mark answer the question, right? Did you hear the question?
So, maybe,
yeah.
I think I can take the question. So okay. Currently the feature only supports Docker, but conceptually, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, so what's behind this feature supporting dev container is actually the ability to connect to a remote container via SSH. And I think this doesn't make any assumption what that is. So if I think to use another thing, something else than Docker, it must be started somehow, right? From a connection point of view, I don't see an issue to connect to something else than Docker. And it probably works today. If it for example, with Gitbot, that should actually work today.
Mark agrees.
So I was quite curious what the live collaboration looked like from the other end, and also what is the intermediary transport like? That magic number, where does it go, and is there a server that handles that, yes. And is that open as well?
Yeah.
Right now there's a server running that by Typefox, and they're doing this so you can try the feature out, etc. The idea is, I think in the long run, already that you can run your own server, and what it does, you can download the software, you can run the server yourself. It generates a session, it generates a token for that session, which I give him. He enters that. There's also the second join collaboration instead of start a new collaboration session, and he just enters the code there, and you get connected.
So does he see the editor, terminal, explorer, or?
Yeah, basically he sees the same, the file system I have, he sees the editors opened, I'm not sure, it does, okay. He sees the open editors, and he sees where my cursor, he sees my selections, etc., what I type. And
you can also create files, and then there is a button you can click to follow somebody, and then it will take you to where they are. I discussed yesterday with somebody what's the typical use case. I would say the primary use case, at least from my point of view, is really to look at the same thing and really collaborate. Of course, you could do also things in parallel, but then there is somewhere there's a border where it makes more sense to use Git again to collaborate. But for example, if you collaborate and then you say, hey, let me quickly change the number in the other file, you can also do that. Yeah. And I would like to add, we're currently in discussions with the Eclipse Foundation to host a public instance of that. Not because we do not trust Typefox, but it would be good if there would be a publicly hosted server by an open foundation for public work, essentially.
Hi, so thanks for the talk. My question is, I understand that both Theia and VS Code are based on the same code OSS open source.
No,
Ah,
no.
they are not.
So the commonalities are they both use the same code editor, the Monaco code editor, and they share a lot of standards like, for example, language server protocol, DAP, and so on. But the core code space is fundamentally different. CodeOSS is basically the project behind VS Code. The open source part of VS Code is in CodeOSS, while Theia doesn't share any code there. And the main difference is that Theia has a modular architecture, which allows tool builders to really adapt it, right? So CodeOSS is not meant as a platform. It's really the code basis of VS Code that is published, while Theia is really meant as a platform. So if you want to adapt something, like for example, you want to take away menu entries, or you want to create a custom UI, or you want, for example, a toolbar that is there in Theia, you cannot do this with VS Code except you fork. In Theia, because of the modular architecture, it's actually foreseen that you use the API to add new stuff, to change stuff, to remove stuff. So it's really meant as a framework to build tools. Yeah.
But do you usually, like when VS Code is developed and has new features, do you develop them also on your side, or you pick them for the repository, or how does it work?
That's a good question. So the good news is that most of the new features in the VS Code ecosystem these days are provided as VS Code extensions. I would say over 95%. And because Theia is compatible with VS Code extensions, you can just use them, right? Depending on the license, of course. There are VS Code extensions out there where it's forbidden to use them anywhere else than in VS Code. And in those cases, like LiveShare is an example, then we come up with open alternatives. Yeah. But it's not that we have to redevelop anything that they do. Whenever possible, we basically share the features, for example, via VS Code extensions.
Yeah, so for example, they have the C++ Microsoft extension. Can we use this with Theia, or do we use the CDT there? I mean, what's the C++ support in?
So to
in
my
Eclipse
knowledge, particularly the Microsoft C++ extension is also proprietary. So we use an open alternative then. Yeah.
The CDT, like something like the CDT of the Eclipse RCP, or is it?
Yeah, or, sorry? Yeah, ClangD, for example. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, but now we almost covered all the proprietary things. So it's, to my knowledge, mainly what people care about is, remember, more container support, LiveShare, the Copilot, and the Microsoft C++. So those are all the things that are not available open source over there, and for those we provide open alternatives. Yeah. Any final questions? I think now we have to leave the stage. Sorry. Last question, because now I think we have to leave the stage for the next speaker, or is there a break now?
I just want to add about C and C++. There is special Theia project named CDT Cloud, which is Theia done for C++. So it's still Theia, but it has blueprint, doesn't have CDT Cloud IDE yet, but if there is interest, like, please welcome to these guys. Yeah. And my question was about the touched windows. What are the plans to develop these features, ability to touch back, ability to add more tabs to the touched window, and so, like, what is the current plan for this feature? Thanks.
You want to take it? So our main goal was to enable this and especially make it available to adopters who build their own tools. So if you build your own tool and you want to have one window detachable, you can very easily do that. And we currently do not actively develop on other views, because from what we see, most important things are the terminal, because most developers have a terminal open all the time, and the editors, because that already allows you to really use a second screen very efficiently. And just to mention that, for the AI support, the chat window, which I found super important, because this is a new window that suddenly you have all day, and it eats up space. So this we also made detachable. Right? And if you have wishes for another particular widget where you think it would make sense, we are happy for feedback in that regard.
If I may, it's a bit like always, where VS Code offers a feature, there's a bit of a framework that you can use, because you have to contribute into that window where you extend the CSS, JavaScript that needs to go in there, right? There's a bit of a framework on how to do that. And then it's a matter of doing the work and finding out what does this window need to, or this widget need to work in that separate window. But the approach is general. It works for everything pretty much.